Next on Currents News, famed volunteer group the Guardian Angels are hitting the streets of Brooklyn to help combat anti-Semitism. I'm Emily Druby, and coming up, I'll tell you all about their Catholic connection.
Also on Currents News, they could be a sleeping giant on the verge of shaking up the presidential election. We'll have an exclusive report from Iowa.
The celebration of Catholic education continues in the Brooklyn Diocese as Auxiliary Bishop Raymond Chappetto visits 2 Queens parishes. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll have the story.
Plus, there was no black box on Kobe Bryant's helicopter. Could his death remain a mystery forever? The news starts right now.
You walking the beat?
Yes.
You might remember them mostly from the 80s, but now the Guardian Angels are back in full force fighting one of the worst kind of crimes. Good evening. I'm Lydia Serrani. A familiar New Yorker is taking action to confront the growing number of anti-Semitic hate crimes. Curtis Sliwa is patrolling heavily Jewish neighborhoods in Brooklyn with a sense of duty that comes from his faith. Currents News' Emily Druby joins him on the streets.
Thanks for coming by the neighborhood.
Neighbors stopping to say thanks as the Guardian Angels patrol the streets of Brooklyn. The famed volunteer crime prevention organization has beefed up patrols in areas with large Jewish populations, like here in Crown Heights, as anti-Semitic attacks are surging.
Whenever people wanted to blame their troubles, personal or public, on anyone, it was always the Jews. So it's almost like we have a moral obligation to make up for historical anti-Semitism.
Curtis Sliwa founded the Guardian Angels, feeling a moral obligation to help others, driven by his Catholic faith and upbringing. They became known for patrolling the subways when they were dangerous, but they've always gone where they're needed. And right now, that's Brooklyn.
It seems almost like every decade there's a wave of this anti-Semitism, which is expressed with physical violence.
Hate has been on the rise, the NYPD reporting a 26% increase in anti-Semitic crimes in 2019. Here in Brooklyn, Jewish people have been attacked in the streets and swastikas have been drawn. So the Guardian Angels are responding, and locals are grateful.
There were a lot of tough times, and they had our back, and we're forever grateful for them for that.
Brooklyn Rabbi Noam Gross says the Angels have always helped the Jewish community. He's grateful for their continued assistance. He gave Curtis a Rebbe dollar, a highly valued item to the Jewish community, given out by a top leader as a reminder to help others. Curtis keeps it on him as he patrols along with the mass cards of his mother and father. But he doesn't really need a reminder to continue helping others. It's part of him, ingrained in his fabric. In Crown Heights, Emily Druby, Currents News.
U.S. Attorney General William Barr is promising that the feds will do all they can to combat the surge of anti-Semitism. This morning, he met with Jewish leaders in Borough Park, Brooklyn.
It's appropriate to meet today, the day after the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, to really commit that this department, this administration, is going to have zero tolerance for this kind of violence.
Barr told them that the Justice Department is working with the FBI to chase down suspects of hate crimes locally and nationally. He reported that the feds are pressing charges in a Brooklyn case where a woman slapped 3 Orthodox men. Accused Hanukkah stabber Grafton Thomas is not fit to stand trial for an attack on a rabbi's home in Muncie, New York, according to a doctor. He's charged with stabbing 5 Orthodox Jews last month during Hanukkah. Thomas has been found incompetent by a psychiatrist. A federal judge is giving prosecutors 2 weeks to respond. Now to the White House, where President Trump unveiled a new peace plan for the Middle East this afternoon. The deal keeps Jerusalem as Israel's capital and all West Bank settlements stay in place. Trump promised billions in aid to Palestinians and said he'd open an embassy in their new state.
Palestinians will be able to seize the new future with dignity, self-sufficiency, and national pride. To ensure a successful Palestinian state, we are asking the Palestinians to meet the challenges of peaceful coexistence.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was at Trump's side when he made the announcement. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reacted to the deal saying, quote, 1,000 no's. With the Jewish people getting prominent attention in the news, there's new information tonight about how a heroic pope saved lives during the Holocaust. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports on what experts are saying, including the current pope's top UN diplomat.
What happened made all people make a cry, never again.
The newly named Vatican ambassador to the United Nations describing the impact of the Holocaust, one of the worst evils in human history. Archbishop Gabriele Caccia telling leaders about the extraordinary efforts undertaken at the Vatican to protect the Jewish people.
Humanity, the feeling of piety with a care for others gave some hope where there was only despair.
At a UN symposium, a panel of experts presented material showing the Catholic Church was one of those sources of hope. Gary Krupp, the founder of Pave the Way, an organization dedicated to breaking down barriers between religions, addressed the heroic efforts of Pope Pius XII during the Holocaust.
The Pope ordered the protection of what he called this vibrant Jewish community to be hidden in 696 ecclesiastical and private locations, thereby saving 6,381 Jewish lives.
New evidence shows a propaganda campaign launched from the Soviet Union attempted to tear down Pius's reputation and cast him as an anti-Semite after his death in 1958. Today, the church is strongly condemning the surge of hate against the Jewish people worldwide, warning that the very dark time of the Holocaust can never be repeated.
We say never again. We say we remember, but we want also to act.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Tonight, the White House is warning that China's deadly virus could become a very serious threat here in the U.S. Doctors in Wuhan are scrambling to contain the outbreak that has now killed more than 100 people and infected nearly 5,000. This morning, the U.S. Health Secretary said the biggest risk is that so little is known about the disease. At the same time, priests in many Asian Catholic churches are now wearing masks while distributing communion. Tonight, as memorials to basketball legend Kobe Bryant grow larger, we're learning there was no black box on his helicopter when it crashed. Now investigators are looking for help in figuring out what happened. Connor Powell is on the ground in Los Angeles with the latest.
Last radar contact was around 9:45 a.m. and is consistent with the accident location.
More questions than answers as the world waits to know what caused the tragic helicopter accident that killed NBA superstar Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 others. Now, federal investigators are seeking help from the public.
We're looking for photos of the weather in the area of the crash.
Investigators say weather is just one factor they're looking at.
We look at man, machine, and the environment.
The area around the crash site is now on lockdown in an effort to keep curious people and paparazzi away. No one is allowed within 5 miles of the site or allowed to fly any lower than 5,000 feet above. As investigators comb through the wreckage, millions of people around the world are grieving.
He was like my real-life superhero, and superheroes aren't supposed to pass.
He meant a lot to the city, he meant a lot to me.
I just can't talk.
The iconic Empire State Building splashed in purple and gold in honor of Bryant. For the first time since the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, the Lakers have postponed Tuesday's game, saying in a statement, quote, "This is a very difficult time for all of us." Connor Powell, Currents News.
Now to Capitol Hill and the impeachment trial of President Trump. Courtroom sketches show his defense team making their case to the Senate. They're wrapping up today. The prosecution has already rested. Next, senators will ask questions of each side for 16 hours. A vote on witnesses, including John Bolton, could happen on Friday. There's a lot more news headed your way. Things could be changing in Iowa that impact this year's presidential election. We'll have a Currents News exclusive report. We're there when a Brooklyn bishop meets with kids and their teachers for Catholic Schools Week. And a special day is coming soon. It altered the Constitution. I'll talk about that with a Brooklyn parish priest. Do you have a story idea? Want to share a tip with us? All you have to do is email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number at 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The nation's growing Latino electorate has long been described as a sleeping giant, one with the potential to impact elections but low voter turnout. The tides may be turning in 2020, and it may start in Iowa. Currents News' Michelle Powers was in the state ahead of the caucuses, and she has a story of a growing population with a potential wild card.
Well, I hope there's a lot of people there today.
It's a Tuesday night, and Maria Bribriesco is heading out.
Oh, it's so much fun.
With her caucus in a box.
If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu.
Maria is a member of the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, and she's training people, especially Latinos, to take part in El Caucus.
We recruit people to be captains for each of the candidates.
Though Latinos make up only 6% of Iowa's population, they have more than doubled in the last 2 decades. In nearly a dozen towns scattered around the Hawkeye State, Latinos make up more than a third of the population, and most of them are Catholics.
In the Hispanic community, I was saying, si se puede, se debe. If you can, you should.
Father Rudy JUAREZ ministers to some of the largest Latino communities in the state.
It's been a blessing and a boon, and it's also been a challenge, I think.
While the influx of Latino immigrants is revitalizing many towns, Father Rudy tells me it's been tough to persuade the community to become politically active. But organizations like LULAC are hoping this year will be different. For the first time, the state is offering 6 Spanish-language satellite caucus sites in an attempt to increase participation. LULAC is reporting more than 50,000 Latinos are registered to vote, making it a potentially important block for candidates. But their votes are complicated.
I say to myself, it's really hard to vote as a Catholic.
Latinos like Angel are torn on issues like abortion and immigration. But he votes every chance he gets, even if that means voting for an unpopular candidate. It's he and his wife's way of turning history on its head.
You grow up in communities where it doesn't matter anyway. That idea gets pushed generation through generation.
Despite the increased efforts this year, Maria and Angel believe the party still hasn't done enough to empower Latino voters not only in Iowa, but nationally. And that could hurt the party in the general election. The Hispanic community in Iowa is also young, which suggests they will likely be a force in campaigns to come.
We're a big focus group. They come and test their message here, and if it sells and if it does well, it helps them like it's a slingshot effect. They'll do well in New Hampshire and onward.
Maria will be a precinct captain come February 3rd, and she has just one message for those Catholic immigrants who may come to caucus.
Continue to be brave. Continue to be brave, because this is so important. It's going to have an impact on your children 10 years from now.
In Davenport, Michelle Powers, Currents News.
As Michelle reported, Catholic voters may be a key deciding factor at the Iowa caucus and perhaps even the presidency. Here to discuss that with me is a national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. Welcome, Christopher.
Thanks, Lydia. Good to be back with you.
So now some political experts, they say that Catholics are the ultimate swing voter. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, part of when we talk about the Catholic vote, it's really almost indistinguishable from the general populace because it reflects just the general demographics. So like in the most recent election, the presidential election in 2016, it was split 46 to 47. So it was really quite, it's right down the middle. And so that narrow margin is a critical factor that both candidates in the general election will be vying for.
Right, because Catholics often don't identify with a specific political party. As a Catholic, you can sometimes be a Republican or a Democrat.
Exactly, and then you've got this sort of murky middle of those that sort of swing both ways because a lot of Catholics, as you know, do kind of feel politically homeless. And so where those, politically homeless Catholics decide to cast their ballot could swing the election.
In the past few decades, Catholics have been leaning towards Democrats, but most of the Democratic candidates actually support abortion up until birth. Do you think that'll hurt them when it comes to the presidency in November?
Yeah, so the most recent data says there's something like 21 million pro-life Democrats that the Democratic Party is increasingly sort of alienating by sort of having such a staunch position on abortion. And so I think, what you hear often from sort of pro-life Democrats is that if there was sort of a bigger tent approach, so they might feel more welcome, they would attract their votes back.
Now, do you think President Trump needs a Catholic vote in order to stay in the White House?
Well, he certainly wants it. We've heard him say that he's going to roll out a number of new initiatives for Catholic voters, and so he's going to make a strong appeal. And again, it's that sort of slim margin that could swing the difference.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Exactly.
It'll be a very interesting.
A lot can happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christopher White, national correspondent for The Tablet and Crux. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
President Trump is getting a win from the Supreme Court that will change benefits for immigrants. In a 5-4 split, the justices are allowing the so-called public charge rule to go into effect. This decision allows the White House to block immigrants wanting a green card or a visa if they use public assistance. Learn, serve, lead, succeed. That's the motto of this year's Catholic Schools Week, but it's also what Catholic students and teachers strive for every single day. Tonight, we head over to Our Lady of Hope Catholic Academy in St. Joan of Arc School in Queens, where Auxiliary Bishop Raymond Chappetto paid a visit. Currents News' Tim Harfman has that story.
Students showing their appreciation for their Catholic education and the values they receive.
Attending a Catholic school allows me to grow in my faith, and being here, it's helped me make so many friendships and so many great memories.
I value discipline and religion, and it's such an important thing in Catholic schools.
Students at Our Lady of Hope Catholic Academy in Middle Village and St. Joan of Arc School in Jackson Heights received a special visit from Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Raymond Chappetto this morning. The bishop talked to 800 students on the feast day of St. Thomas Aquinas, patron of Catholic schools.
A wonderful role model for our students in terms of his learning and his holiness. He was gifted with great wisdom, and at the same time he was gifted with a great sense of holiness.
At Our Lady of Hope, Bishop Chappetto toured the classrooms as students learned using iPads and smartboards. At St. Joan of Arc, students performed songs and read essays about what they've been learning. This year's Catholic Schools Week motto, learn, serve, lead, succeed.
Religion is very important when it comes to a person's life, and when you're learning that and you're learning more about your faith, it helps you a lot.
I'd want to go to a Catholic high school and continue my faith because it is very good here.
A desire to grow in their Catholic education tomorrow thanks to planting the seeds today. In Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re has been elected as the new dean of the College of Cardinals. As dean, he will guide the meetings before an eventual conclave. That's the Assembly of Cardinals who will elect a new pope. However, since he's over 80 years old, he could not actually participate in it. Cardinal Battista Re also held important positions during the tenures of both Pope John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Still to come right here on Currents News, we hear from the dad of that little boy who charmed the Pope. And National Freedom Day is about to happen. It's something important you should know about. We'll look at it with a Brooklyn priest. But before we go to break, a programming note about our special series on human trafficking.
Social media is being used to recruit a lot more, and that's part of the reason why victims are maybe sometimes younger too.
Vulnerable children targeted and lured by predators into the seedy world of online exploitation. Join us for part 3 of our series, Human Trafficking Exposed. That's Thursday right here on Currents News. This Saturday, February 1st, is National Freedom Day. The day honors the signing of the resolution that later became the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolishing slavery. Here with me now to talk more about civil rights is Father Daniel Kingsley of St. Martin de Porres Parish in Brooklyn. Welcome, Father.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here this evening.
Okay, so I would venture to say that a lot of people don't even know what National Freedom Day is. Why is it so important for everyone to honor and celebrate it?
I think it pivots to what the founding fathers said about making this a more perfect union. We have to recall at the beginning of the country's history, African Americans were considered 3/5 of a person. It's not until the bloody conflict of the Civil War that we realized that slavery cannot exist in a country that claims itself to be a democracy, honoring the rights and freedoms of all. And that finally, with the abolition of slavery, we could recognize human beings, but still more work to be done as we see in the unfolding of the country's history, Reconstruction, segregation, Jim Crow, and 1960s civil rights movement, but even still more work to be done at the present hour.
And as you mentioned, for African Americans, this is especially important. According to the NAACP, African Americans are imprisoned at more than 5 times the rate of whites. I know this is a very complicated question, but what do you think could possibly be done to change that statistic?
I think we as a country have to take seriously criminal justice reform. We say that everyone has a right to legal representation if they can afford it. But as we know, unfortunately, in many jurisdictions, public defenders are often overworked. It was revealed in one study that public defenders only have maybe 5 minutes for the many, many clients that they see. And that, mind you, if you're being prosecuted for a crime that may risk you losing life or limb, you want your lawyer to be prepared to have all the facts. But if you don't have access to quality representation, you're doomed to go to prison. But I think that's one of many facets of criminal justice reform that need to be tackled if we wish to reverse this trend of the incarceration of too many Black and brown people, because again, how does 13% of the population represent almost 80 or 90% of the prison population?
Right. And you're a lifelong New Yorker like myself, and as progressive as our city is, there are still a lot of tensions. Some would say that they feel like African Americans are still being profiled by police. Do you believe that's still the case? Do you still think we have a lot more to go?
I think our city's recent history in the last 20, 30 years reveals that. I think Bill de Blasio said it best, the tale of 2 New Yorks. I grew up in a house where it was discussed with heated passion, Amna Louima, Amadou Diallo, and Eric Gardner. And I think when you speak to many Black and brown New Yorkers, they'll tell you that this is a trend of whenever they encounter law enforcement, there's a disregard for their civil rights. When you speak to white New Yorkers, there's a feeling that, well, if you'd only obey the law, but since when, for example, in the case of Eric Gardner, does selling a loose cigarettes risk one not only losing their life, but the violation of their constitutional rights?
Oh, no, it's such a complicated issue. Thank you so much, Father Daniel Kingsley of St. Martin de Porres Parish in Brooklyn. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Finally, tonight, an update on that little boy who made a surprise appearance on stage with the Pope. Last week, Savino took over the Holy Father's audience by wandering up and down the main steps, seemingly oblivious of the Pope and the huge crowd. Savino's father, Giorgio, explained why he or his wife didn't chase after him.
I was worried at first when he started walking up there. We didn't know what to do. If I had picked him up, he would have started screaming, so I just let him be.
Savino was only 29 days old when he first met the Pope 2 years ago. His mother, Anna, hopes Savino will grow up to become a priest, but says that she won't be pressuring him. We'll see about that one. Well, that's Currents News. I'm Lydia Serrana. Thank you so much for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time. Good night.